Three days after a mass of glacier ice, bedrock, and debris collapsed near the Nepal-Tibet border, the scale of the disaster is still expanding. At least 547 bodies have been recovered in Nepal, while Chinese authorities report 5 deaths in Gyirong County. That brings the combined confirmed toll to at least 552. Nepal's disaster authority says 977 people remain missing or out of contact. China separately lists 558 missing in Gyirong. Those records may overlap, particularly for travelers moving across the border, so they should not be presented as one settled total. The flood struck without a local rainstorm, sweeping through Timure, Rasuagati, and Siapru Besi before moving into the Bote, Koshi, Trishuli, and Narayani river systems. Rescue teams are now searching from the mountain frontier to the southern plains, more than 100 kilometers downstream. Satellite analysis indicates bedrock and glacier ice collapsed in the high Lende catchment, releasing an avalanche that gathered water, moraine, mud, and boulders. A Chinese government geologist estimated that the debris flow reached about 50 meters per second, or approximately 180 kilometers per hour, across part of its first 20 kilometers. That estimate helps explain why people at the border crossing had almost no time to react. This was not a river slowly rising across a floodplain. It was a dense, fast-moving mass confined inside a steep gorge, striking buildings and bridges with water, rock, timber, and sediment. Early reports described a natural dam forming and failing. Scientists are still reconstructing the exact sequence, so that mechanism should remain provisional. What is confirmed is that the seismic signal first labeled an earthquake came from the collapse and debris flow, not tectonic shaking. The locations where bodies were recovered reveal how far the flood carried people from the mountain corridor. Nepal Police reported 13 bodies in Rasua, where the disaster began. Farther south, teams recovered 38 in Nuwakot, 40 in Dading, 44 in Gorkha, 29 in Tanahun, 134 in Nawalpur, 28 in Nawalparasi, and 221 in Chitwan. Those figures total 547 and may change as riverbank searches continue. The largest number being found in Chitwan shows that the debris surge remained deadly long after leaving the narrow Himalayan gorge. Identification is difficult because many victims were carried across district boundaries without documents. Police, hospitals, tourism agencies, and families must compare physical records, travel lists, photographs, and personal information. A rising recovery total therefore reflects both continued searching and the immense distance covered by the flood. Nepal's National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority reports 977 people missing or out of contact, including 517 foreign nationals. Across the border, authorities in Tibet list another 558 missing in Gyirong County, including 260 foreigners. Together, the two reports contain more than 1,500 entries, but they may not represent 1,500 different people. Travelers moving from Nepal toward Mount Kailash could appear in tourism, immigration, tour company, and Chinese border records at the same time. Some may also be alive in isolated areas without electricity, phone service, or passable roads. That distinction matters. Missing is not the same as confirmed dead. Officials must reconcile passenger manifests, rescued person lists, hospital admissions, shelter records, and border data. Nationality breakdowns have already changed several times and will continue changing as embassies and families establish contact. The rescue operation has expanded from airlifts into a multi-district search across mud fields, damaged riverbanks, and isolated mountain settlements. Associated Press reporting cited Nepalese authorities saying 3,742 people had been rescued by Friday. More than 3,200 of those evacuations involved aircraft, reflecting how completely the flood severed road access in the upper valley. Nepal had mobilized more than 13,000 security personnel by Thursday, supported by helicopters, medical teams, engineers, rescue dogs, and heavy machinery. Chinese teams also reached the devastated Gyirong border crossing after approaching through damaged high-altitude roads. Different agencies publish narrower operational totals, so rescue counts may not match from one bulletin to another. Some count only people removed directly from danger. Others include evacuations, injured survivors, stranded travelers, or people moved between shelters. The clearest conclusion is that thousands are alive, but many communities remain difficult to reach. The immediate flood has passed, but satellite imagery shows two lakes upstream of the disaster zone, and authorities say the risk will continue until both have drained. One lake rose above 2.5 million cubic meters before overflowing into the Lende Kola on Friday. Rescue operations were suspended for roughly 3 hours, then resumed after the resulting river rise was measured at about 2 feet and judged manageable. A second lake appears larger in surface area and had no visible outlet in the latest Friday imagery. That means water pressure may still be building behind debris. It is inaccurate to say another catastrophic flood is definitely coming. It is equally unsafe to declare the danger over. Nepal is using satellite monitoring and planning cameras and sensors near Timur, while Chinese teams are measuring the blockage, flow rate, surrounding slopes, and continuing rock movement.
कति मान्छे लयो लयो हे प्रभु बाप रे त्यो त जम्मै गयो यार सयौं हजारौं मान्छे मरे आफ्नो जग्गा त गयो चितवन पुलिस सबैको आफ्नो जग्गा हैन भएन नि कहाँ भाग्नु पाउँछ यार ताल फुट्यो सिजर के भयो
The flood destroyed the transport and energy corridor connecting central Nepal with the Tibetan frontier. Updated road reporting says roughly 40 kilometers of roadway and 41 bridges were destroyed or seriously damaged. The entire 42-kilometer route between Betrawadi and Rasuagadi was broken at multiple points, cutting the principal overland trade and pilgrimage connection. Nepal's electricity authority reports that 12 operating generation centers totaling 431.1 megawatts were shut down or disconnected. Another 470 megawatts across 15 projects under construction were affected. The Trishuli 3B hub substation was completely damaged, along with transmission lines and towers. Electricity has been restored to parts of Nuakot through alternate routes, small local plants, and temporary equipment. Rasua remains much harder to reconnect because substations and access roads were swept away. Full restoration will require engineering assessment, reconstruction, and stable access through a valley where slopes are still moving. The Red Cross estimates that more than 90,000 people have been affected across the disaster zone, with food, clean water, shelter, sanitation, and medical access becoming the next major concerns. Destroyed roads mean helicopters can deliver medicine or evacuate injured people, but they cannot replace the volume carried by trucks. Relief convoys were temporarily blocked when the first barrier lake overflowed, showing how an upstream change can interrupt assistance far downstream. Health agencies have reported damage to medical facilities and warned that contaminated water, crowded shelters, interrupted sanitation, and decomposing debris can increase infection risks. The emergency is therefore changing. The first hours focused on escape and air rescue. The next phase requires safe water, temporary housing, electricity for hospitals and communications, body identification, and sustained supply routes. Communities isolated through the monsoon cannot depend on small helicopter deliveries indefinitely. This is the second catastrophic flood from the Lende River corridor in only 14 months. On the 8th of July, 2025, a superglacial lake on the Purpu Glacier drained suddenly, destroying the border bridge and killing at least 9 people. Wednesday's disaster appears different. Current evidence points to a collapse of bedrock and glacier ice that became a high-speed debris flow. The events should not be treated as identical, but their concentration in one short valley is an unmistakable warning about exposure. Roads, border facilities, settlements, and hydropower projects sit beneath unstable high-altitude terrain. Warming can weaken glacier ice, thaw frozen ground, and destabilize steep slopes. Scientists still need a formal attribution study before assigning this single collapse entirely to climate change. The responsible conclusion is that regional warming increases the background risk, while local geology, ice structure, river confinement, and infrastructure placement determine the final disaster. The immediate priorities remain finding survivors, identifying the dead, monitoring both upstream lakes, and delivering essential supplies to communities cut off by destroyed roads. Residents along the Lende, Bote Koshi, Trishuli, and Narayani systems should follow official alerts and stay away from riverbanks, damaged bridges, and unstable slopes. Rescue teams may pause again if lake levels or slope movement increase. Recovery will take years. Engineers must decide not only how to rebuild 40 kilometers of road, dozens of bridges, border facilities, and power projects, but whether critical infrastructure should return to the same narrow channel. This disaster shows that satellite detection alone is not an early warning system. Monitoring must connect to river sensors, cross-border communication, local alarms, evacuation routes, and decisions made before the next collapse begins. Thank you for watching Extreme Weather US. Subscribe for calm, carefully verified disaster coverage and continuing updates.